Welcome to this edition of the Roadie Reporter. I am your host for this segment, Susan Wynn. Being a municipal manager in the Ocean State is hard enough if you're just a hired hand. If the position you hold is elected, however, you're in real trouble. Have you ever noticed the growing sense of panic in the Rhode Island State House as the General Assembly's 6-month session draws to a close? It's not just legislators who are scrambling to figure out who's on first. The administration is trying to get a bead on what they're looking at with the spate of new laws and regulations. Even the judicial branch has to be eyeballing the hastily prepared new offerings. After all, they may have to decide whether or not any of them are legal on constitutional grounds. So who gets left out in all of this hubbub? Why the cities and towns, of course. The root of the problem is that the state government has one great big mouth to feed. If Smith Hill doesn't keep the public service unions happy, then a great unhappiness will befall on Smith Hill. Here's how it works. Unions get ruling class politicians elected, so office holders make darn sure they reciprocate with such goodies as binding arbitration, endless contracts, and eternal overtime. So if anything jeopardizes that payback, say being broke for instance, George Nee and Bob Walsh are not amused. Okay, but how does that hurt municipalities, you ask? That's where the state goes to get all that money they need to keep the unions happy. We all understand an unfunded mandate as some new regulatory requirement imposed on cities and towns by the state, but not paid for by the state. Well, what about endless contracts? The state law effectively eliminates any management authority over the labor negotiations process. So municipal labor costs go up, making the aforementioned bosses smile, but forcing the burden of raising that extra cash down onto property taxpayers without so much as dinner and a movie first. Here's how State Senator Gordon Rogers summed it up during a recent presentation.
The reason why I went up there is as running a town of Forster for many years, unfunded mandates that were passed up by the legislature that tied my hands, although I had to take responsibility and take the blame for having to raise taxes when really my hands were tied through many unfunded mandates. And I used to get very mad about that.
As a minority member of the Rhode Island Senate, I'm not sure how much Senator Rogers will be able to actually accomplish, but he certainly understands the problem. Here's hoping he can do some cost shaming and maybe slow down the burial of municipal authority that's currently underway. But what about you and me? As taxpayers and voters, what will we be able to accomplish up on Smith Hill, say, in November of 2020? Do you think it might be time to vote for your own self-interests rather than doing what your union letter tells you to do? Hey, no one has to know.